I want to start off by thanking everyone for signing up for this. This event was developed through discussion within our Access, Inclusion, and Diversity Committee within MASFA. The discussion was brought about just due to the fact that there were, with COVID, having these severe impacts on things, particularly education within certain realms and certain groups and communities, the access to having certain things was not necessarily present. So we wanted to make sure that we had a discussion that may have addressed everything that schools were doing in relation to providing those type of access to students, other precautions that they're taking to ensure student success. But we also wanted to have the students here to also express what they have been experiencing, as well as how they might have been able to advocate for themselves to have additional things that we might not have been made aware of. So I want to thank everyone for signing up. I want to thank my panelists for agreeing to take part in the discussion. And so I'm very happy to have you all here with me today. I want to start by having an address of the recent attacks that happened to our Asian community, which I have prepared a statement. So in addition to what the Access, Inclusion, and Diversity Committee, just giving a backstory on that, our goal here is to always engage the membership of MASFA by stimulating discussion that promotes awareness of how financial aid professionals can and do influence the status of various underrepresented populations we all seek to serve. I would be remiss if I did not shed light on the recent attacks on members of our Asian communities. The acts committed by Robert Aaron Long were horrendous and despicable. Although they are stating this monster's acts were not motivated by race, it's hard to believe when you look at the uptick on attacks on Asians since COVID. You add in the fact this uptick came after our former president openly referred to the coronavirus as the Chinese virus. This type of ignorant and insensitive rhetoric can become the beacons of hate and pillars for discrimination. These attacks continue to show how generalizations and stereotypes continue to lead to the mistreatment and violence towards marginalized communities in America. This attack is no different than the many attacks on the Muslim community after the 9/11 attacks, the Orlando nightclub shooting that took the lives of many members in the LGBTQIA community, the Walmart shooting in El Paso that took the lives of many Latinos, or the Charleston church shooting that took the lives of several African Americans. All these crimes were committed out of hate towards a specific group of people. We all face injustice in some way, shape, or form, but I beg everyone to not compare who has it better and instead and fight them all together. As Martin Luther King said, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And as I say, it shouldn't be a death sentence to have a melanin difference. Let's stand together and continue to advocate and invoke change. Love requires less energy than hate. Let's continue to promote peace. And with that, just got to make sure that I also, let me come back to the screen so I can see what's going on. I want to at least extend, so therefore people can know how to get involved within committees with MASFA. So Tanika, would you like to take that?
I sure can. Thank you, Jerron. My name is Tanika Smith. I'm the co-chair of the Access, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee of MASFA. So if you want to join us, please log into masfa.org/volunteer or go to masfa.org, click on contact and choose volunteer. And we are Access, Diversity, and Inclusion. So please come and join us by all means. Thanks, Jerron.
No problem. Thank you, Tanika. So with that, we'll turn it over to our higher ed panelists. I'll start by giving introductions. We have Angel Beato from Northern Essex Community College. He's currently a manager of student accounts. We have Evie Marcello, who's the director of undergraduate financial aid at Northeastern University. We have Corinne Peterson, who is the current director of financial aid at UMass Dartmouth. And we also have Amy Staffier, who is the director of financial aid at Simmons University. We can start with I'll go through some of the general questions, and as I mentioned, anyone can feel free. I will also add that if you aren't necessarily speaking, it might be helpful to have your camera off. I've learned that through these large Zoom presentations, too many cameras can impact, have some network issues. So I will advocate for that, so therefore we can ensure that nothing goes haywire. This is the thing, when you have dual screens, you gotta go back and forth a lot, and things get lost. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so starting off with a question. We've all been limited by COVID, either physically constrained, technologically constrained, and resource constrained. What have been the biggest constraints in your ability to operate and serve students effectively? And any of you can take that question first if you like.
Go for it. Hi, Corinne Peterson. Jerron, thanks for the great introduction. The first thing that comes to mind for me is antiquated thinking. So I imagine on a lot of our campuses, it was kind of this idea of if you're not right there, then you're not doing work. So COVID kind of put us in a place where we really didn't have any choice. We actually went off campus right before everything really shut down. I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and I went to our administration and I said, they're getting ready to shut this down. So we need to plan now, make sure everybody has the resources that they need so that we have a seamless transition to home. So it took a little bit of cajoling for them to get them to understand that it was going to be okay. People were going to be okay at home. They were going to get their work done at home. So because I imagine for many of you, it was kind of you were there on a Thursday and they said, go home, and that was it. So it's been trying to open the hearts and the minds of the upper administration about the opportunities that we now do have due to COVID. So that's been a very, very big challenge for me, because ultimately putting in all these changes or having a seamless operation is all about making sure that we're supporting our students. So that's what I always brought it back to, and I was always able to kind of move them along. So that's it.
For myself and our university, we were in a lucky position that for our office, everyone had just gotten laptops like in January, and we had a paperless process. So we were able to transition rather seamlessly and still be able to support students. But some of the things that were really difficult to navigate through, particularly in the summer, was somewhat similar is the decision making and how long things would take, and trying to be as proactive as possible and communicate with students to try to let them know that, at this point, we'll let you know a decision. And sometimes it was kind of waiting for those decisions to be made and knowing that students are being really frustrated. And myself and my staff, sometimes would have a hard time. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh no, now all of a sudden we're going to have to do a boatload of work to be able to try to get things out as quickly as possible. Because, to the same point as Corinne said, and what kind of we use as a mission, like, we're best when our students are first. And so that's what we're always going for. Not that upper administration isn't doing the same thing. But these are all big decisions to have to make. And so that I would say is one of the, most challenging things to try to navigate through.
Yeah, I think that I can kind of second that as well. I think, well, actually, when COVID and the shutdown first happened, I would say our office, we did not have a lot of some of the things that other offices had. So we don't have a fully paperless process. We had no capacity or structure for online appointment setting. And so those were kind of the most immediate constraints, is figuring out how are we collecting this paperwork and how are we going to meet and assist the students at the very beginning when there were still so many questions. Thankfully, we were very nimble. We had technology available to us that were open to us as the pandemic started, and then we were able to easily transition. So I do think, similar to what Corinne stated, there was this feeling of, if everyone's home, will the work be done? And it actually was, and I think in a more efficient way than it is when we are physically here. So that's kind of a side observation about that. But then as we transitioned into fall, our institution is open for the fall, has been, and open for spring as well. And so there were a lot of questions still left about how does that look? Are we engaging with students in person, even though were open. There's still a pandemic. The cases started to rise in the fall, as well as when we returned in January. So there was just a lot of trepidation from the staff, as well as I think within the student body, the administration. We navigated that quite well. I don't know that the students want to see us in person any more than we want to see them in person. So I think it's worked out on either side. And, you know, we still continue to offer the virtual things, but that was kind of that immediate kind of looking around and like, how are we going to do this? But I think obviously everyone understood no one knows what we're going to do. The poor students had to leave Boston relatively quickly, so we were not necessarily the first things on their mind, and that gave us that little bit of time to figure out what do we do next.
For me, I'm in a community college, so I mean, much smaller population, very different population than what I was used to, and I was at Northeastern for 10 years. A lot of things are in person, although, I mean, there's phone calls, there's emails, but a lot of things are done in person. The transition, we transitioned, I think we transitioned well. However, as we were transitioning, I felt that there was this anxiousness, because like we needed to get it done. We needed to be sure we can get it done and be sure that we could operate, because I felt, at least from the sense that I got, was that everyone wasn't 100% sure. And there was a lot of unknown, but we were still working. And one of the things I remember when we first went remote was that I didn't have access to my phone and to my direct line. And we have me and two other people answer the student accounts phone line. And so I didn't know how to access that. And then I was told that, oh no, you can access that. And so there was this, just as time went on, by the end of March, early April, things got easier as opposed to when we first got home. We're sent home, actually. And we're not 100% paperless at all by any means, but on the financial aid side, at least, they have a good process of submitting forms online, which help. You can take pictures, scan them in. So in terms of student accounts and financial aid, we did all right, I think, in transitioning, but there were constraints because a lot of the foot traffic was in person. And without that, it just increases the amount of phone calls and emails that you get. And we all know, everyone here knows, you know, if you don't get back to an email in a certain amount of time, you're getting another email and another voicemail. So, but I think we did a pretty good job transitioning.
So, I mean, I've heard a lot of changes to processes that had to be adjusted. So that leads me into the next portion, which is, how has the way you interact with students changed? How has customer service gotten better or possibly worse during this time?
I think it depends on who you're asking. I think, you know, from a student standpoint, they may feel a little bit differently just because certain things take a little bit more time because we're virtual or because you need to email us versus being able to run into our office in between classes and ask your questions. You know, to them, they may feel that, oh, I'm experiencing delays or it's not similar to what happened pre-COVID. But I do think overall, just from the perspective of getting the information out there, I think that has improved. I think being able to connect with the person that you want to speak with and not have to kind of leave it to the roll of the dice, that has improved. So I think both sides can say, yep, it is a little bit better. At our school, we have open walk-ins for students to meet with their counselors. And again, the counselor may not be here on a particular day. They may be at lunch. They may be in a meeting. And so you don't know, oh, am I going to speak to this person? I'd like to speak with Jerron. I don't know if I'll get to speak with Jerron. Now you'll know I'm setting an appointment with him. I will talk with him on this date and have him work on my questions. So I think in that aspect, the customer service has improved. I think from our side of things, like as an administrator and as someone kind of working in the trenches, I would say, yes, you know, it's a lot easier for us to kind of know our day than before. And it's a lot easier for us to plan being more proactive about certain situations, because we'll know what's up next as far as appointments and what the staff will have to do, those certain things. So I think that overall, we've been able as an organization to be more proactive because we can see the scope of the work. And we've made some other changes related behind the scenes. We use ServiceNet for our email inboxes, so we know the volume for the entire office at any given time. So like we just kind of know what is happening. So as an administrator, I would say our customer service is definitely improved. I think the students is a mixed review. You know, I think they want to do things when they want to do things, and sending an email and having to wait for a response versus just jumping in, they may say, but overall, I think it's good on both sides. And those are my thoughts.
You know, there's not a large change, I would say, in my view, to how we interact with students. There's certainly the loss of that in-person, you know, counselor on duty, and a student walks in with, you know, with an issue and talks to someone right there. But I don't think we received a lot of backlash or anything from that. I don't think, I'm not sure that anything was worse or anything was better. We have kind of gone through a concerted effort of making some changes in the office and having a real focus on customer service. And we kind of had, prior to the pandemic, made some changes within how students basically communicate with us, and try having it go through kind of a front line with 3 staff, and then things get escalated to, you know, financial aid counselors or student account staff for kind of higher level issues. One thing that was kind of neat that we have recently utilized. So prior to the pandemic, we had used Calendly, which is, you know, a link that can connect to your calendar, and a student can make an appointment. And prior to the pandemic, it was just a student could make an appointment. You then had to kind of reach out, and it was either you're calling them or they're coming in. But with the pandemic, Calendly made Zoom, like in their free version, which is what we had, you were able to then connect Zoom to your Calendly account. And so students could just make appointments. And then I did upgrade, and if anyone's wondering, they have like a discount for higher ed people, which was great. But for our accepted student days that we're going through now with an incoming class, where we were always on campus, and we had a whole set of days on a Saturday where, you know, students are there, and we were meeting all day with families who are coming and trying to make decisions. And so we ended up utilizing the paid version because they have a kind of a round robin. You can set up events, and people can go in, click on a link, and set up an appointment at a set period of time, and it will just kind of move through the rotation of people who are in there so that we're evenly kind of distributing out. And that has been fantastic. And I think, granted that in person for accepted students events are really wonderful, but this is something that I think was a lot better than what we transitioned to immediately, because we had our accepted students days not long after the pandemic hit last year. So that has been something that I think was an increase in something that we had done last year, which was just quickly going to, okay, it's all virtual and not going to be live.
For us, our interactions is primarily, you know, phone and heavily on phones and emails. When the fall started, or probably around August, we did do some in-person or only by appointment meetings, interactions. But then as the pandemic numbers had increased in the fall, late fall, that stopped. However, I do believe that, at least I've probably done it once or twice, so that I would meet with someone if I had to on campus. And we do, on occasion, if someone comes in, we'll assist them if we can. We won't turn them away. There is at least one person that goes onto campus every day because of mail, payments that come in. And sometimes people just want to pay in cash. Not that we advertise it, and we we do say make payment online or mail it in, but once in a while you get a random person that wants to make payment in person. But our interactions and customer service, if someone's talking to me, and I'm in student accounts, if someone's talking to me, there's a problem that I have to try to assist them with, and I may not be able to assist them with that issue. And it's a financial issue typically. But besides that, you know, I do my best to triage. Again, we have a phone line. It's just me and 2 other people answering that phone line for the entire college. So we do our best to triage on our end and make sure that students get to who they need to speak with and filter those calls. But I think our customer service is probably the same. It hasn't like in terms of level of service, it hasn't decreased. I think we're all right. I haven't heard many complaints, so I think we're doing all right for now.
Okay, so switching to a new kind of same vein of topic, but kind of a little bit more nuanced. How have your offices adjusted some of their policies regarding professional judgment on matters such as budget appeals, change in circumstance, as well as maybe hold lifting? And what has your institution done to help any vulnerable students impacted by COVID, i.e. emergency funds, changing of aid, that kind of vein? Anyone can shed light on what their institution has done?
I'll go first. So not that we're doing change in circumstances, but for me, I had the tuition and fee adjustment appeal committee. And we don't have a medical leave policy. So if there's a situation going on with a student, they have to submit this form, and a committee reviews the forms. Someone from student accounts, financial aid, the academic side, our policies and procedures side, and someone from the registrar's office. So these have become, you know, heavy in. I couldn't complete courses because we're online. And we've tried to make adjustments in terms of, for students who have made payments in full already, giving them a credit to take that class again later. So similar to somehow medical leaves operate. One thing that we did institute in April, I want to say, was that previously our registration threshold was $100. We went up to $500. And we would allow students to register for a future semester. You also mentioned helping vulnerable students emergency funds. So we did have the emergency funds available for students. They had to complete an application. There's requirements that the government had in place, you know, completing FAFSA and meeting certain criteria. But as we keep receiving funds, we were reaching out to students as much as possible. We were able to allot some funds towards students just to wipe out their balances. We didn't need them to submit an application for that, so that was beneficial. Some students had called me asking why they couldn't pay their balance, and I was able to let them know that, you know, it got paid in full for that semester, so you're all set. Just small population of students. And I know what we call CARES 2.0 coming up that we're trying to prepare for and get that list going of how we're going to issue that. We're doing our best, you know, to keep up with making sure we get those applications out to students and letting them know that it's available to them. Yeah, let me see, trends. So I mean, in terms of trends, what we did see were students that, you know, withdrawing due to things that were brought on by the pandemic. So being online, students who aren't able to do online courses, it's not what they thought it would be. It's difficult to navigate through that, especially when you're on the student accounts and doing appeals and you're letting them know that they have a balance that they need to pay. But we're doing our best to help accommodate with the students, offer credits to them for a future semester, whether they take that class or another class. within like a year and a half's time. I don't think I missed anything.
I can go next. I don't think that we made any sweeping changes as far as utilizing professional judgment. We'll utilize professional judgment in the best way possible for our students if we can, and are pretty well versed in those. One thing we did do, which was interesting. So basically, our institution was, the decision was we were fully remote for the fall. And of course, as with so many places, if they did that, it was like, we'll see what the spring will bring, and we hope, right? But everyone knows that everyone's best hopes and wishes don't always come true. So from my point of view, I was nervous. We don't meet full need. We do a decent package, but we don't meet full need. And I was nervous that if so basically we switched out the room and board component in the cost of attendance for, kind of an at-home, what we would use for students who are at home, which is much lower. And if I was nervous that if I left the spring on-campus rate in there, and then we were not on campus, we would have to make a significant adjustment, and it would look to students as if things were uneven with what they would have received in the fall if we had to make an adjustment, because making that change affects the total amount of need-based grant anyway. And so we actually put everyone for the full year, and it was, as I would say to my staff so many times this year, it's like, well, this is going to require a careful communication. And so trying to explain what we were doing, and we were really doing it for the benefit of the students. And what we did was we allowed students to then, because we know that there are some students who, may still be living off campus. So we have put a process in place for them to an appeal for increase the cost of attendance for living off campus. And so that was something we had never done before. And that was actually a really interesting process. It was hard to navigate through for a little bit because students immediately thought you were taking things away from them, even though, you try to carefully communicate. But that was something that we did. We also had an emergency fund that the university did some fundraising for, which was wonderful. And I worked with my colleagues in student affairs to help in the administration of that. And then with the CARES funding, with that first round that we received, I really was looking at those most vulnerable populations and did some block grants based on EFC, prioritized, the highest need students, and got those funds out right away, because at that point, everyone was having some sort of, a cost associated with having to, be remote and go off campus. Our institution, I reserved some of those funds then for this current year, and knowing that everyone was going to be remote, I created a technology CARES so that students could request funds specifically for technology to make sure that they had what they needed. We also have a technology partner. We have online education in our graduate programs. And that partner actually had given us a grant to provide, because they also were able to work with us and get all of our courses online through their platform for our undergraduate students. And they provided some funds for first-year students specifically for technology. So it was really important for me to make sure that we're serving all of our population, so that there was this technology fund that I could use for students in other grades, which was really helpful. And we did a lot of good communication out to students about the funding. When that second round that has come out, I did more block grants, and this was open to our online students, and we again did communication. It's amazing how quickly what seems like a large amount of money, that kind of is allotted, how quickly that goes and how much need there is out there. And you know, just I think the best you can do is try to be able to help students as best as possible, and you know, provide some other resources as well. So if I'm only able to give you, you know, $500 and you were requesting, you know, $3,000, here are some other resources in the community that you might be able to access. And then we also had that emergency fund as well. So really kind of working with partners across the university. So those are kind of some of the things that we did.
Corinne, do you have anything to add to this?
I'll add, in my experience was very similar to Amy's. The good thing I can say about student affairs, I can say a lot of good things about our student affairs group, so I want to start there. They worked very hard in tandem with advancement to try to cultivate funding sources for emergency grants or emergency loans, emergency grants. They didn't do a great job of advertising it. It was almost like the state secret on student affairs had these monies. So kind of when COVID hit, those things, they initially oversaw the disbursement of CARES. Now, student affairs is really good at connecting with students, finding out students' needs. I don't know that they're the best people to oversee a large amount of money. It's just a matter of, that's not their wheelhouse, that's our wheelhouse. So we actually moved the whole process over to financial aid, and it was good to partner with them though. So it didn't become this adversarial thing. It was, all right, we're gonna manage this, and we're gonna have you manage your emergency funds, and we're gonna tie those two things together. So for the student who, you know, we had a huge need before COVID. One of my colleagues on campus always likes to say, you know, people, when COVID came, they say the sky is falling, not realizing that the sky had been falling for a lot of students for a long time. So we were able to say, we weren't able to give you $1,000, but we're going to get you over to student affairs, and they're going to help you, you know, get additional money to get those tires for your car, or money to finish paying your tuition, or whatever it ended up being. One of the biggest things we ended up dealing with, which really came out of the blue, was when the CARES dollars initially came out and you couldn't use it for online students. We found that we did have a lot of online students who had technology concerns, and that's something you don't assume. You assume students taking classes online, so they've got to have a computer, they have internet, they have what they need. We found out that we had a large majority of students trying to do their classwork on their phone. So we were able to go out and fundraise for actually laptops. We went and purchased laptops, and we were able to include them on that. So I think not only was that experience no better for what we call our day students, but for our online students too, we were able to make the process for them better. So they actually, as a group, became much stronger.
And for our school, I would say that we've had a variety of opportunities. I've been, again, kind of mentioned in other people's kind of answers. Initially, when the pandemic hit, our president and the cabinet contributed a portion of their salaries to a fund for students. And so those funds have been used to assist those students that could not utilize CARES. And so we have the CARES funding, we have that funding. It also, contributions can be made by members of the community. And so it continues to grow. That was the initial pot where the contribution from the cabinet and president, but then others in the community have been donating as well to assist our international students or other students that needed technological help or assistance with getting back home, or all the things that occurred because we had to shut the campus down. And so even still kind of a year out, we are still awarding funds from this. pot of money to assist those that can't utilize the things offered to us through the federal government. We've used CARES, we've moved some of our funding over to ESEOG. We've done a variety of things to help kind of just all our students that are eligible for federal aid with whatever costs or things that are happening because of the pandemic. As far as how we're evaluating appeals or special circumstances for this incoming process, you know, obviously all of our families or most of our families will be experiencing some side effects to the coronavirus, be it furloughs or loss of jobs, et cetera. And so we've created an appeals committee to try to centralize that work and provide hopefully faster answers. Thankfully, the guidance from the feds allow a little bit more flexibility and leniency as it relates to calculating that EFC. And so we're using kind of all the tools that are being open to us to kind of adjust and get federal funds for students or kind of move quickly to adjust. We use both FAFSA and Profile for our incoming students. And so using whatever tools we have to kind of adjust and get a true read for their ability to pay. We are a full need school, so it's definitely important to us to evaluate, knowing this is a current situation, but also trying to evaluate what that means for the future. So people are experiencing a whole host of different changes, some for right now, some that will affect them long-term for the next 5 or 6 years. So it is a really delicate balancing act. And, you know, I don't want to kind of express that we've perfected anything because that's not accurate, but we're doing the best we can and trying to be fair for these families because they are going through things. And especially for our incoming students, you're making a decision for your next 5 years in a time that's kind of just unprecedented. So we are aware of that, empathetic to that. And so we try to keep that at the forefront, but we're using a whole host of all the various things. And, you know, like Angel mentioned, you know, we have CARES 2.0, 3.0, all the various versions of CARES that just keep coming down, and we're trying to figure out what's the best way to assist the students. So, you know, we're still plugging along, but that's how we're handling things here.
Thank you all for sharing on that. Kind of switching gears and other aspects of COVID, outside of just not only the virus, there was also during this phase, there was a large increase in kind of social justice initiatives such as Black Lives Matter. And now you're even seeing now the discrimination against Asian Americans within the US. So I'm wondering, have there been any students that have posed, like what concerns have students posed to your institution in relation to COVID, the community, social justice, and safety and inclusion?
I guess I'll just jump in. From a social justice standpoint, I think, you know, kind of all the activities that were occurring in real time while we were in quarantine surrounding George Floyd and just the calls for, you know, equity, et cetera, obviously as an institution, and I'm sure all our institutions, you know, we heard that call, we heard the need to discuss things and be upfront about things and be aware of unintentional biases or, you know, policies that are not making it an equitable place for people from different backgrounds. You know, I think everybody heard that, it resonated. And, you know, as an institution, you know, our president kind of answered that call. And, you know, we had town halls as an institution. We had, you know, safe space discussions. We had groupings for staff, faculty, students, for all of us to kind of come together, but also talk separately in kind of safe spaces and, you know, discuss the experiences that individuals may be having. And so I think those are all positive steps. We've made commitments to increasing our diversity and, you know, kind of ensuring that this is a space that is representative of the world, not just, you know, kind of whatever it was before. So, you know, I think, you know, obviously, like many institutions, you know, I don't want don't think this was unique to Northeastern, but, you know, we saw what was happening. We've done a lot of different things to try to answer that call. With the recent kind of, you know, issues that are happening with the Asian community, you know, I know and feel confident that we'll also come together again to kind of address those and have those meetings and those discussions, because, you know, again, we have no tolerance and there is no place for that type of like hate or, you know, bias. So definitely we'll be doing more, you know, to ensure that everyone feels protected and feels valued. But those are just some things that we did.
At our institution, we have been going through, prior to the pandemic, you know, focusing, which I think a lot of institutions have been doing similar things on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But something that happened in, I think it was June or July, was that our past president, who had been there for many years, was retiring, and we had a new president starting right in a pandemic. So wonderful way to start your tenure as a president. And she is our first woman of color president that we've had, and she brings with her specialization in crisis leadership and diversity, equity, and inclusion and positive leadership. So I think that brought with it a lot to the table. She, you know, rather quickly convened a president's advisory council on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and has tasked them with some good work. And I think that has been really a positive thing. And she is a very positive, outgoing person who brings issues to the table, communicates with the community in a very careful and kind of to the point way, and really kind of highlights what people are feeling and validates that. And I think that is a good thing. I haven't heard a lot from students where, you know, sometimes students can bring backlash that, you know, you know, at the highest level, that maybe they're not feeling heard. And what I'm seeing is that our students do feel that support, and that they're being heard, and that there has been a lot of programming put forth, you know, this year around a lot of the issues. And I think that's been a really positive in this.
Angela, Corinne, one of you want to jump in on this topic?
Sure, I'm more than happy to jump in. I think one of the biggest positive changes I saw on my campus was when we're always talking about, I feel like when we're always talking about the topics of social justice, equity, inclusion, diversity, there's sometimes this attitude from people that are not of color of, this isn't for me. So after, you know, the sad and sorry incident that happened with George Floyd, we did have came together in the university, put together, I guess I would call it a listening session. It was particularly for staff people, so I'm kind of addressing that one. And I heard a number of people say, well, I'm not going to go to that. That's not for me. And it was having that conversation and people being open to that conversation. That was the biggest piece, to say, no, this is for all of us. This is for our students. This is for you. We are a community, and we have to come together at this point. So it's almost like the flower that grew out of the dirt, unfortunately, where people were more open to hearing that, because I think many of us know it's people who are not of color. When you talk about those things, they become uncomfortable, and they don't want to be uncomfortable. So they don't want to have that conversation. but there's an openness there. There was an openness there that's still there. And I see the folks, especially in in our office, really looking at our students with a very different perspective. And to see that was really, really great. And the other biggest piece too, kind of tying into what I mentioned before, is this assumption that people of color are going to do all the work. It's always, and I know on some number of campuses I've been on, it's okay, there's an issue. Well, just you all tell us what you want. And it didn't become that. It became, we're going to do this together. So like I said, unfortunate events brought, big changes on our campus. So I was really grateful for that.
Thank you for sharing. So kind of still within that vein, but more so looking at from you guys' personal perspective, what have you saw within your personal community, i.e. your ethnicity and culture, social status, ranking, that during COVID that has even concerned you, made you happy, or both?
I'll go first. So Northern Essex Community College is the first Hispanic serving institution in New England. We were designated by the government, I believe, in like 2001. So a large, I think, if not 50, a little bit over 50 now, percent of our population, student population, are Hispanic. And what comes with that are being the first generation student, and I was a first generation student. And what comes with that is that you don't know. There's a lot that you don't know about higher education, about college, the ins and outs, the navigating that. Your main focus is likely, I need to do well, I need to do my work, do well in my classes. That would be your main focus in terms of school. But what the people at the school don't know is that your main focus is your home. You may be working 1 or 2 jobs at that time. So with this pandemic and people may be losing their jobs, a lot of our students, they don't attend school like a traditional 4-year school student would. And sometimes it's, for us, being a community college, a student is referred to as transient, because they come to the facilities, they go to class and they go home. Being online and being remote in the pandemic, they may lose their job. They may have to, all of a sudden, after enrolling in courses, have to drop out because they need to take on another job because other people can't get it. They're losing their jobs. So with all that, and even the not knowing there's documents that you have to submit to get aid, you have a large portion that you could receive, but no matter how much we try to communicate, they just put it off and stuff like that. Those concerns already, they're already concerns prior to the pandemic, and now it's even more because there's just so much more on everyone's minds, personally and at home. So how, like, our concerns are, how do we reach these students? How do we get them to react and communicate with us better? Yeah, we can communicate with everyone that does reach out to us, but with those that don't, we're trying our best, but there's always going to be a handful of students that you're not going to get. And I would assume, and I'm pretty sure, not that I'm pretty sure, I know that handful of students has increased because of the pandemic, just everything that the constraints it has put on everyone.
So the question was kind of like, I'm going to go in a different direction a little bit, because you mentioned like your kind of personal community and things that might, that you saw that were good, or things that were kind of upsetting. And one of the things that really sticks out in my mind that is disappointing is what I guess I'll classify as hate, and not understanding, and it could be a whole number of things, but in my own community around parents, and just the kind of anger that they were kind of putting toward the school system, right? So the public school system, high school, I have 2 high school daughters. And just, I sympathized with the administration, knowing how much work they're trying to do, knowing that, anyone, I think, in whether it's public school, whether it's higher ed, I mean, we've gone through so much, and there's so much, additional work that is happening, and you're trying to transition, you're trying to do the best you can. And sometimes it's very disappointing to see people who seem to put forth such anger and misunderstanding and not being as empathetic as perhaps they could be. Now, obviously that's not everyone, but I saw a lot of that, and I find it disappointing because additionally, these people are parents of, students that will eventually, be students at any one of our institutions. And what are you modeling, for your children? If what I see you writing on, social media or other, in a school committee meeting, what are you modeling as a best, practice, and how to be and treat people if this is kind of your mindset and you're completely open to be putting that out there for so many people to see, was a little bit disappointing, and something that I saw in COVID.
Kind of actually, because the question kind of talked a little bit about your own community. One thing that I don't think has been at the forefront of the conversation in the communities of color, and especially Black communities, is the reluctance to get the vaccine, and the reluctance not having access, reluctance to get the available vaccine. I'm still having this debate with my own mother, who is a very educated woman. She works at Brown University. She is not getting that vaccine. And when we have that conversation, we begin talking about Henrietta Lacks, we begin talking about the Tuskegee experiments. I would really like to see the medical community take responsibility for the way that they have treated Black people over the years. I think that's the only way we're going to come to peace with the history, but also getting people to feel comfortable with moving forward, because we're not going to get through this unless people are willing to get that vaccine. So that's the thing that's missing for me, I would say, in my community, that I would really, really, really like to see, and something that is negatively affecting my particular community.
Okay, thank you all for sharing with that. I greatly appreciate it. So we know that the end of COVID, we couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel at one point, but now you're starting to get a little glimpse of that little ray of light that we might be actually getting out of this COVID period. I think it's ironic that we had AC and BC times, and now that could actually be applied again to before COVID and after COVID. So is there anything that has come out of this pandemic that your institution will continue to utilize or advocate for post-COVID?
Well, I think for us, and then I'm sure, again, out of the other panelists, we will continue to offer virtual appointment setting. I think that was a great success. I think that, again, it allowed some manner of control on the part of the student, that you can, wake up whatever time, make an appointment for whatever day. So I feel we'll offer that. I think as an institution and as an office, I think the concept of working remotely and not physically having to be here 5 days a week will stay. The question of will they be able to work, will things still get done, has been answered. So there really are no more roadblocks to letting people work from home. Obviously, there's a need to have a physical presence. So I don't think we'll obviously be able to stay in this 5 days a week, everyone at home, like that type of setting. But the concept that every level of the office could, in some capacity, work from home and actually accomplish things has been answered. So I think that that will be something that we keep afterwards. And I think obviously seeing what happens with COVID and the need for, an document imaging system, I'm happy to say that we are now moving towards that. And so, we're working with a vendor to have that. So that's something, office-wide that we will have a way for students to submit documents online, and there won't be this issue of, trying to get to your nearest, fax machine. You can upload documents. So very excited about those things. So we're keeping a lot of, I think, the positive things from this pandemic, we're keeping that on kind of BC or whatever, AC.
Sharon, the light at the end of the tunnel, I just hope is not a train coming at us. But what I would say is I would echo what Ebony said, the virtual appointments and creating a different process. I've been thinking about how I can use what I'm using for that ASD as kind of our new way when we are in person. The ability to have some flexibility for our staff as far as working and what that looks like. I know the university is kind of looking at that and revising their remote work policy, but I don't see that it would be that everyone has to, be back in person. I think that will be great. And then the university has continued to fundraise for that emergency fund that we had set up last spring. And I think that is fantastic. And I hope to see that they continue to do that. They have, just put out a new campaign recently. And that will be something that's really helpful because sometimes it really is just, a couple of $100 or even $1,000 that someone needs for something, and to be able to provide that for students, is great. So that's a good thing coming out of this.
We're definitely going to continue doing more online classes, more options for more sections for classes. That is very beneficial to the students and for us. And we found that we're hoping to have a more on-campus presence for the fall semester. Of course, we'll see how that goes. Hopefully it's not a train, it's actual light. One of the things that, I remember earlier in January, we had this discussion with our VP of Student Affairs and Academic Affairs, is that we had a discussion about things that we would carry on when we do go back on campus. But one of the things that I hope that we do continue to do is discuss how we're doing, because it wasn't really being done when we were on campus, when we were all just going into the office. You do ask someone how they're doing and they just say, I'm doing all right, I'm fine. But we've been having more meetings, questioning, not questioning, but just discussing mental wellness. For the staff specifically, like, how are you guys doing? What are things that you think you could do better? Just having those discussions with alike managers that are going through the same thing that you're going through. And I for one definitely appreciate that. 2020 was a very hectic year for all of us. For me, I got tested positive for the coronavirus in April early on, and it was very scary back then. I didn't know what was going to happen. And just everyone is, working harder. You're at home, and I would be shocked if the majority of the people here in this Zoom right now told me that they didn't work longer hours. So I definitely do. I can't be the only one. I know people that I work with are working longer hours because your computer's literally at your fingertips. Your work is right there. And that can take a toll on you over time. And just, you're always in the house. How do you cope with all this change? And it's been going on for so long. So I hope that the discussions of mental wellness and wellness overall continue amongst staff within all of our institutions.
One of the, just like everybody else, I'm sure we're going to continue with the having the virtual presence. But one thing that we've been looking at in our office, and I don't want to say it out loud because this is being recorded, that I instituted to try to see how it would work, was expanded hours. Everyone's looking for more flexibility. You've got, our employees who are home with children. Spouses are trying to juggle children. It might be easier for someone to be with their children in the morning and then be able to get their work done 12 to 8 or, 10 to 6. So not having a physical presence in the office, but what we've been doing is allowing people to make appointments later on in the day. And that has been extremely successful, especially with working families. So it's something that I've been discussing with our administration, and at first they weren't very open to. It was kind of, well, students can come in from 9 to 5, I don't understand. And I said, well, how is that student coming in with those 2 working parents? And it was kind of like this strange light bulb moment that happened on the 3rd floor. So we're really going to be looking at that and really having our office be able to, offer more times at work for students.
Thank you. I appreciate all those responses. We kind of ended shortly, but I think this is perfect because I would like to open the floor up for questions. If anyone, I didn't see anything getting added in the chat during the time frame. So if anyone would like to ask a question, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. I know some people may not have the agenda, but we're not scheduled for a break until 3:15. So if you have any questions you would like to ask the panel, please feel free to ask it now.
It's not a question, but I like that you all had a positive that came out of a really odd period of all of our lives. Because no one ever had planned to see what COVID would look like for us, having to work with our students and our peers in our collective, real lives, and having a big, massive change going forward. But it's good to see that you have found ways to still be there for your students you serve and be there for your community and keep maintaining your role and keep making these adjustments as we keep going along to find out more and more change keeps coming about as of it positive and negative. So thank you for being there and supportive to that need for your students. So thank you for that, for sure.
Thank you.
I'd love to, no, I'm on the high school side actually, so I work with these children every day. And I would just love to hear if your universities have surveyed prospective students, because there's a completely different, view on the other side of what colleges should be doing and how they should be handling, whether it's virtual or in person, hybrid, whatever. And then also, has there been talk about cost of attendance? A lot of times cost, the grandeur of being on a college campus is what kind of justifies the high sticker price. But if more colleges are kind of adopting this hybrid model, or, it's really great that we can go virtual and we're probably going to keep some of that, how do you justify, the $70,000 or $50,000 sticker price? So I don't know if any of your universities have had those conversations yet.
I mean, yes, only because, not, and not as much right at this moment, but certainly last spring and over the summer, as we were heading into, and as I mentioned, at our university, we were 100% remote, and we only had about 85 students that were living on campus, and we were targeting, we have a large nursing program, so juniors and seniors who had some clinicals right in the area, as well as students who were in situations where they were unsafe in their homes. We kind of reached out to them and said, you know, you could live on campus. And so, of course, the question of cost, you know, was brought up. We froze our tuition. That was what we did. But we also, as I had mentioned, had partnered with our technology 2U, who does helps with our graduate online program, and our graduate tuition is the same on ground and online. We still have those same costs, you know, paying professors and things like that. In my own personal eyes, I think a lot of the you know, on campus is, I've never seen it quantified as what is that amount, and that room and board cost, you know, is somewhat wrapped into that. But we didn't. We just kind of froze, and that was what we did. And we are looking to have a slight increase on tuition this coming year. So I don't know that we will be making a reduction. I mean, one of the things that I was thinking in this whole pandemic and having all of, you know, the changes in modality is, you know, we all know that we're at a tipping point, right? In so many different ways in higher ed, in the cost, in the number of students, particularly here in the Northeast, that are going to college. And I kind of felt like, is this what will finally make some change? I'm not quite seeing it yet, but maybe that is what is next on the horizon, is that there will be a big shift. But there still are some, I think, things with perception where if an institution sometimes who is at this high cost all of a sudden does a tuition reset, you know, it's this idea of like, oh, is something happening there? Like, are they going to go down? And then it changes people's view of that institution. But is it something that where everyone kind of, you know, does something? So my hope is that there is some sort of change in general in higher ed with cost, but I'm not quite seeing it happening yet. But that's a great question. I'm glad you asked it.
I would say that for us to justify what our price tag is, we still have to continue to support our students, and they put emphasis, and that emphasis is put on us and explained to us. Supporting our students, continuing the level of customer service that we have. Otherwise, if there's a drop in that, how can you justify, one, the price, or two, if you were to increase it? We had a fee increase by $6, one fee, but we're a per credit school. We have per credit rate, so it's going to go up a little bit. It's probably going to happen again upcoming this year. I'll find out in April. So you can't decrease, can't take anything away besides, you know, in-person classes, because obviously, but you can't take something away and expect that the price is still going to be the same. I mean, the price is going to be okay. So to justify, you have to still put forth, you know, that the customer service, at least from my perspective, customer service, responsiveness, and being there for those students. That's how I would say we, at least for Northern Essex, that you adjust for that, for those types of things.
I actually have a question that anyone can answer. I know that the FAFSA completion rates are pretty low, not just in Massachusetts, but pretty much nationally. So I was just wondering, what are some strategies or tactics that you guys are using to encourage students to complete the FAFSA?
I will say, like, for our institution, for our incoming class, which we're kind of working with right now, we have not necessarily seen a decrease. Like, oddly enough, percentage-wise, the number of students who indicated they were applying for financial aid and have actually applied and received their awards are like in the 80–90%. So we have not really seen a drop off, and it could just be a side effect of kind of our price point. You know, we're at that higher level. You'll need kind of both applications to really get the full picture. But just because of those statistics, because of that information, we have done a lot more to reach out to students to advise them of these things being missing. We have 2 unique populations in our pools that are kind of an auto committed population. They're the early decision students. And so we have a lot of kind of hand holding with those groups to make sure that you are doing what needs to happen to get your full financial aid award. So we are reaching out a lot more to students just to make sure that, you know, you indicated you were applying for aid and we still are missing things. So kind of what is putting up this roadblock for you. And a lot of what we're finding are students have unique situations. They don't have the mother or father in the household, and so they're unsure. And so I do think it's good that we are doing this outreach so that we can provide them with the guidance they need to take it to the next step. But definitely we have not seen a large number, but again, we're a private institution, so it most likely will be different than at a public institution.
So I'm gonna hit this from 2 different angles. So similar to Ebony, you know, kind of private institution, I tried to craft some customized emails this year that are a little, rather than the kind of more generic, like, please complete your FAFSA, right? So trying to put a nice quote in there, trying to reach out and make it a little bit personalized for our students. And we have seen for our incoming students that we're similar to Ebony, pretty much on par with where we have been in the past. But I will just throw a little plug in to MASFA has a FAFSA Day committee, and I'm one of the tri-chairs. To the point of, you know, volunteers and volunteerism, if people are interested in that. We have done, you know, a lot of work to, and that was something that was, you know, incredible to, everything was always in-person events, right? And we had lots of volunteers and all at different sites, and we brought that to be all virtual this year. And we are putting a toolkit together to try, and we're getting that out on our website, but then out to high schools so that they can use that information with the presentation we have and some other, you know, an FAQ document and things like that. And we'll put that out to the MASFA community as well. But we are going to try to offer another session. We were all done, but we're going to offer another FAFSA Day, and to the point of you know, the kind of the community college, which we heard from someone within the community college in MASFA that it would be great to have something that is later, you know, maybe in the summer timeframe or late spring, summer. So we are going to do that. So I just kind of throw that out there as a little bit of a plug for that group and the work that they're doing. And if anyone would like to help in that effort, we'd be happy to take people on.
All right, so,
go ahead.
go ahead.
That's
So-
okay.
So you can answer, Corinne, but right after you, we'll take a break and we'll set to pick back up at 3:30 for our college experience and well as high school student experience. But go ahead, Corinne, you can go right ahead.
I'll make it quick. One of the things that I will say we're doing very different and similar to some of the other panelists is being a little more targeted in our communications, especially with our quote unquote no FAFSA families. There was always this typical assumption in admissions that these families are not filling it out because they don't need to. And we've been able to have the conversation that with what we're seeing with COVID, with layoffs and furloughs, there's going to be a number of students in that group who are not filling it out because they don't know where to start. So we've been really targeting that group, and in the communications have been a little different to the same group. So it's, to the family that typically says, I don't think I'm going to get anything, with changes, we're trying to add more aid, please apply, because, in the past, you may have thought you're not going to be eligible, but, there's a good chance you could be now for some more institutional aid. And then for, the other student, kind of don't know where to start. We have, they love to call them FAFSA labs, but they're really, a student can go there. It's supposed to be at the same time, same place every week. So if they know they go, they get help at this place. So we've made them virtual now. And they're actually manned by our peer counselors. It's the financial aid, we call it the street team. So that's been really, really working, because a lot of times, students are not going to listen to us. They're going to listen to their peers. So we've also started having our communications starting to quote unquote come from our peer counselors rather than from us. So, we're really trying to, get that affinity for students to other students.
So with that, we'll take a break and reconvene at 3:30 for our college and high school student experience.